Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michelle Easton, president of the Claire Booth Luce Policy Institute, and I want to welcome you all to our September Conservative Women's Network lunch. I want to thank you for joining us today, and special thanks to our partner, the Heritage Foundation, Bridget Wagner here. We've been doing this together every month for a long time, too many years to count, and it's a great pleasure for us. We are so happy today to have Emily Miller as our CWN speaker to talk about her brand new book, Emily Gets Her Gun, But Obama Wants Yours. Great title. It's another great Regnery book. She's the senior editor of the opinion pages at the Washington Times and writes columns about national policy issues and makes regular appearances on national TV and radio as an expert on gun control and other important topics. Her reporting on the Second Amendment, including her Emily Gets Her Gun series on the District of Columbia's gun laws, has won her several awards. The National Rifle Association's Civil Rights Defense Fund gave her their highest honor, the Carter Knight Freedom Fund Award. The last recipient of that award was Senator Ted Cruz of Texas. And she also received the Second Amendment Foundation's Journalist of the Year Award. Emily was previously the senior editor at Human Events and a columnist for AOL's Politics Daily. She was also at ABC News, where she was the associate producer for This Week, as well as Good Morning America. And she started in journalism as a desk assistant at NBC News. She also served as deputy press secretary at the U.S. Department of State in President George W. Bush's administration. And prior to that appointment, she worked on Capitol Hill, where she directed and developed strategic communications to support the leadership's legislative goals. She's a Baltimore native. She's a cum laude graduate of Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service. Please join me in welcoming Emily Miller.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction. Thank you all for having me here. It is such an honor to speak to this group and to speak at Heritage. I've been big fans of both groups for long times, and it is really wonderful. This is the first time I've had an opportunity just to speak to women only about this issue. And, you know, I find that it's been, women are, I'm sorry, there are two men here. Three. But the reason is because, you know, the gun ownership and Second Amendment has been dominated by men for so long, as if it's a men's issue. And it's really just a human issue. It's an issue of self-defense, and it's an issue of constitutional rights. And the reason, I wrote this book because of everything that's happened in the Second Amendment, the assault on the Second Amendment this year. And unfortunately, since the terrible Newtown tragedy at Sandy Hook Elementary School, President Obama has used that to exploit it, to push his gun control agenda. And to some extent, he has had quite a bit of success, and 5 states have passed gun control laws this year. And they've tried to get a vote in the Senate. They didn't quite get to 60, despite Mayor Bloomberg, who I call President Obama's money man, spending tens and tens of millions of dollars. They're now spending those tens of millions of dollars around the country to try to change those votes. So it's been a big year for going after gun owners and Second Amendment rights. And it's very important that people be aware of the misleading information that's coming out of this White House. It's coming out of liberal media, not the Washington Times, that is confusing people. And so as women are getting more into shooting and self-defense and recognizing that the Second Amendment applies to us just as well as to men, our voices need to be heard. Our voices are being heard. And, you know, some of the facts that we as women should know when we are fighting for our right of self-defense is that when they tell us that it's gun control that would have stopped this terrible, terrible shooting in Newtown, or would have stopped the terrible shooting in Aurora, it wouldn't have. That's absolutely not true. There has never been any gun control law that has reduced crime. The CDC did a 2-year study of this. The government studies this. The Justice Department studied this. Harvard studied this. All these almost anti-gun places study of these things. Never once has any gun control law, whether it's carry laws, assault weapons bans, universal background checks, all these terms, it doesn't work. there are things that do work, but that's a big misconception, and that's easy to get caught up into the emotion of it. And you'll hear the president say things like, we can't let this happen again. We need to do things to protect children, and we need to save lives. But he's not talking about real solutions that work. And the other really important thing to know is that gun ownership is at its highest rate ever right now. It's at over 300 million guns in this country. Half of the families in this country, households, have guns. Women gun ownership, it's lower than men. The estimates go between 15% and 23% as seen as the highest. I'd like to see that rise, but it is still significant. And the reason it's different than there are obviously more men have guns, while women, what they do in these polls they'll say, do you have a gun in the home? So a lot of wives will say yes, and that sort of increases the number for women. And then when they say, do you personally own the gun, the number falls down to more about 15%. That being said, gun ownership is at the highest rates ever, and this is so important to know. Gun crime is down. Gun crime has gone down every year for the past 22 years, since 1991. And it's gone down 40%, as a matter of fact. So you are safer now than you were last year, than you were the year before. But the thing is that only 12% of the American public knows this. 88%, this is a Pew poll done in May, 88% of the American public thinks gun crime has gone up, and that in both recent times or it's the same. And that is because you're hearing all these misleading information. You have the president going out and saying, we can't have weapons of war on the streets, we can't have high-powered rifles in movie theaters, these things that scare people, not based on anything factual. It's just scare tactics and misleading in order to pass an agenda that has been the president's agenda for many, many years, back to 1996 when he first ran for office. The way I got personally involved in this issue, and I've always been a conservative, always been in conservative politics and media. Well, I've worked in media that's not conservative, but I've always been a conservative in the media. And I've always been pro-Second Amendment, and just theoretically, as we all sort of are pro-Constitution of all the amendments of the Bill of Rights. But when it became real to me was when I personally was scared and wanted to defend myself. I was a couple of years ago, and I was dog sitting for friends and at their house, and they had a really big house, a nice house. And I went to take the dog. It was New Year's Day, and I was going out to a party, so I wanted to take the dog for a quick walk, and I stupidly left the front door unlocked, closed and unlocked. And when I got back to the house, just a few minutes later, there was a man in the house robbing it. And he, you know, I was actually, at the moment, wasn't even scared because it was so just shocking, I guess, and it just threw me off so much that I just was like, I said, what are you doing here? And he said, I'm here to clean your pool. And he said, we are here to clean your pool. And the we, that's kind of what jolted me. Well, also the clean your pool on New Year's Day part jolted me. So that was kind of clear. I mean, if he had said, I'm here to like scrape the ice off your sidewalk, it might have been like a little clearer. So I said, well, trying to maybe make him think there's somebody else in the home. I said, well, you know, we didn't order the pool to be clean right now. And he said, oh, it must be the neighbors. And he left. And another thing I did, and the police had given me an earful about, which said never do any of these things that I did, I decided I was going to follow him down the street and see if I could get a picture of him. So I grabbed my phone, and I followed him down the street, and just at the end of the driveway, as I turned around, all of a sudden, there were just 2 pickup trucks and about 15 men standing outside the truck just staring at me. And this is when, obviously, my heart started pounding with fear hit in, adrenaline. I knew I was in trouble. And one guy ran up to me, and as he did, I turned and ran as fast as I could back into the house. I thank God all the time. I wasn't hurt. He didn't assault me. They got away. He was in the house only long enough to get into the kitchen, find my purse, and take my wallet. But didn't steal anything else. When the police came, they dusted for fingerprints, and they really tried their best, surprisingly, I thought, for something like this. And they said what's kind of standard in D.C., because D.C. crime is so bad, these drug dealers, drug addicts come into the city, get their drugs, and on the way out, they hit a bunch of these big houses to try to get some quick cash or try to get some other quick stuff. And the police were concerned, because it was a big house, that if there were some windows left open or doors left open in the basement, that they might come back at some point to try to get the good stuff, because my wallet was the least valuable thing in this house. So as I went to bed that night, they said that they, checked the whole house and the windows, but some of the locks were old, and I was lying in bed and I couldn't sleep, and I just kept thinking, what if all of these guys come back? What am I going to do? I'm lying here in bed by myself. Obviously, as you remember earlier in the story, I never mentioned the dog I was walking, barking, or defending me in any manner. So Champ was like useless in this situation. When people say get a dog, I'm like, you better get an attack dog if you want one that's going to be helpful to you. So I was just lying there, and what I ended up doing is I took one of a dresser and like shoved it and barricaded the door so I could stay inside, and I felt like at least they couldn't get in. But it was the first time in my life I thought, if I had a gun, if I just had a gun on the bedside table, if these guys come in, we know they're on drugs, if they come to attack me, I can defend myself. I have a chance cornered in this room. So the next day, I tweeted that, at Emily Miller, if you want to tweet to me, and I tweeted, I'm thinking about getting a gun in D.C. I was pretty freaked out, obviously, by all of this. And the response was just overwhelming. You can't. It's impossible. You don't know. It's just impossible. Talk to the NRA. You'll never get a gun. And I didn't know what was going on because I knew that in 2008, the Supreme Court ruled in the Heller decision that the District of Columbia's 30-year handgun ban was unconstitutional because the Constitution is fairly clear. It says the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And the D.C. City Council has just decided for 30 years they were going to ignore the Constitution and just ban handguns. So in 2008, the Supreme Court ruled this was unconstitutional, so the city was supposed to allow people to have guns. But what they did, their form of gun control, is they put in all these registration requirements that were virtually impossible to do to make it so hard that people couldn't get guns, or obviously couldn't get them legally because the bad guys are getting the guns. It's just the good guys who aren't getting guns. So when I kind of got a sense of what was going on, I became even more determined to get a gun because I was like, well, something's going on here, and now I really want a gun if they're going to tell me I can't get a gun. And so I said to my editor, I said, I'm getting a gun, and what do you think about my writing it in the Washington Times? I think it'll take a couple weeks. It might be about 3 stories. And he said, that's fine, go ahead, do it. So I started doing it. I knew nothing about guns. I knew nothing about how to get one, where to get one, how that works. So I went to the police station. I hadn't even never been to the police station before. And it's unmarked, oddly. It's downtown. It's not far from here. And I walked in, and there's a firearm registration office. It's right at the front door. And I walked in, and there's a female police officer there, nobody else in the room. And I said, I'm here to get a gun. And she said, are you registering your gun? And I said, no, I just need that permit. Because at this point, I thought getting a gun was like getting a car, a license for a car. Like you get the driver's license, then you can get a car. Like I thought it was that order of things. The registration process is you have a gun, and then they approve it or not and register it or not. But you can't get a gun until you've gone through a bunch of hoops. So I said, no, I don't have a gun. I need to get a gun. I don't know where to go to get a gun. And she said, oh, okay, listen, what you need to do is you need to talk to Charles Sykes, and then you need to take the safety course, and then you need to do this, and don't forget to take this test, and this test is multiple choice, and there's a lot of trick questions on it. And she's like throwing all these things at me and putting all this paper on the counter, is like the stack this big. I was like, I don't understand. I just want, and she goes, and you can't get a permit. You can't take it out of the house. You can have one, keep it at home. Do you want a did you want a Glock? I'm like, I don't know if what I want. I just want a gun. So that's what started it, and it ended up, because of all these hoops, because of all this paperwork and documents and classes and tests, it was 17 steps to get a gun. And the series that I proposed to my editor of being 2 weeks ended up taking 4 months to get a legal gun. It cost $435 in fees. And obviously that's prohibitively expensive for most people in D.C. It was prohibitively expensive for me. And that doesn't include the cost of the gun. And that actually, I tried to expense the gun. My editor had nothing to do, was not going to do that. Because guns are expensive. I didn't know. I thought a gun was like $300, but it was like $780. They're a good one. You can get one of those ones on the streets. But anyway, and that's the thing is that the criminals is they're not going like I am to a 5-hour safety class, and they're not taking written tests, and they're not taking ballistics tests, and they're not going to the police station 3 times. And all the stuff that we law-abiding people are doing, they're not doing that. That's not how criminals get guns. And all the Justice Department studies and all the they do a lot of polling of people in jail and ask them where they got the guns, or ATF does. They get them from straw purchasing, mostly half or a third, which means I'm the felon or I'm the drug addict, so I can't get a gun. So I send in my buddy or my girlfriend who has a clean record. They get the gun and just give it to me. About half of them are stolen, and the rest are bought on the streets. So again, they're not going to the police station before they get their gun for approval. And one of the things, the biggest one as a woman, the hardest part of the whole process was there's a requirement, as I mentioned, there's a 5-hour class they make you take. And they're not teaching you how to safely handle a gun. They're not teaching you how to shoot. What they're teaching you are the laws of Washington. So you have to sit for 4 hours in a classroom, and the big document that Officer Brown on the first day at the police station, they just read it to you, 1 page at a time. It was just the most tedious thing. Well, it took a long time for me to take this class because what the city did is they give you a couple-page document with names and phone numbers on them, and they say you have to take this class and come back with a certificate saying you took this class. And on this piece of paper, there's no business affiliation, no address, no email, no websites. They're just random men. And none of them are in Washington because it's illegal to teach the class in Washington. They're all in Virginia or Maryland, at least by their area codes. So I started calling, and so many of them weren't teaching the class, or I got voicemails and wrong numbers, and the list had never been updated. And in the end, after I went through all 47 names on the list, I came up with 4 people who were currently teaching the class, and they were allowed to charge whatever they wanted. I don't know who these people were. So I went back to the police station. I called, and I said, I'm going through your list, and there's all these strange men on it. How do I do this? Who are these people? And the police officers said, well, they're certified. And I said, well, how do you know who they are? He said, well, we did a background check. I said, half these numbers haven't been updated in 3 years. When did you do this background check? And they said, well, we're not accountable for who they are, what they do. Like, well, that's very reassuring. Thank you. And again, I'm trying to get a gun, and I have to have this class. So when I finally narrowed it down to 3 or 4 people, all of them taught the class in their houses. And I was like, and I don't know who these people are. They're still just random names and phone numbers. And I thought, and my editor was kind of on my case because I'd slowed down this series by then because I couldn't figure out how to take this class, and he kept saying, just take it from anyone on the list. And I was like, he's 6'4", 215. I was like, sure, you can go into some random dude's house and take a class from an armed man. I'm not. I was like, it's a different scenario. And Richard, my editor, was like, I hadn't thought of it that way. I'm like, yeah, I don't think the city council thought of it this way. How is a woman supposed to safely go to an armed man's house and when you're unarmed and a complete stranger? And the final guy who was offering to teach it, he said, I teach the class, it's in my basement. I said to my boss who was on my case, I said, look, I've seen Silence of the Lambs. I'm not going to get skinned alive and thrown in some hole in order to finish this series. So I was like, I was almost at the point of giving up. I was like, I'm not putting my life in danger in order to get a gun to protect myself so my life's not in danger. Like, this has gotten so convoluted. And in this process, I talked to the city council. When I started exposing everything that was going on, the city council moved to change the laws to make it a little bit easier to register guns. And at one point, they had a hearing on this, and I testified that obviously you never thought about women in this scenario, or you wouldn't be sending us out to go to strange men's houses who are armed. So they ended up, by spring, they took that requirement off the law, and they changed the law. So that part's not required anymore, and a few other things changed. But all that being said is the reason that I really wanted to write this book is because that happened right before Aurora and then right before Newtown. And that's when Obama got reelected and decided to make his second-term priority, one of his major priorities, gun control. And I had just gone through all of this to defend myself, to have the right to keep arms. And why, and my issue was, why are we spreading these laws around the country? Now, I've got 5 new states that have them. We already had 8 states with these same exact kind of laws. And crime is going up. And D.C. alone last year, assaults with a gun were up 20%. And this is something you never hear from feminists, sexual assaults and rapes were up 50% in Washington, D.C. And I always wonder, where are the feminists on this? And it's just, you are not safe in this city, and you need to find a way to defend yourself, and people aren't going to go through 11 steps or 15 steps to get a gun to defend themselves. So it really concerns me that as these laws are spreading through the country, and as this president, backed by Mike Bloomberg, are purposely trying to spread gun control laws, it makes everybody less safe. Because one thing we know is as gun control has gone up here in D.C., so has crime. We also know that as gun ownership across the country has increased, crime has gone down. So those are the parallels we know. And, there are solutions, and you rarely hear them from this White House because the solutions they want are more gun control, because they go back to gun control. Even though it's been proven to fail, they always go back to it, and I think that comes from their political philosophy of control of everything in our lives, whether it's our health care, whether it's our education, whether all these aspects. They want to control our guns and our right to self-defense. But there are solutions and there are things that we can do. One of the major flaws in our whole background check system for getting guns, when you buy a gun, which I went through, the dealer calls the FBI and does what's called a NICS check, which sees if you're one of the types of people who we as a society have decided should not have guns, whether you're a felon, convicted drug user, mentally ill, severely mentally ill. People always ask me about that. I'm like, no, if you've got like a few problems and you went to a therapist, you're okay. It's like you have to have gone to a mental hospital or been, ruled incapable of standing trial because you're mentally ill. Those people are the ones none of us want to have guns. Dishonorably charged in the military, illegal aliens, all those people. Then they do a check, it's instant, and if you pass, you get your gun. Well, the problem is a lot of these states are so worried about these severely mentally ill people's privacy, they're not putting the records into the FBI. And I have in my back of my book, you'll see an appendix on what states have them and don't have them and put them in. And Maryland put 6 records in last year. Maryland passed one of the most radical gun control laws this year, and yet they put 6 mental records into this background system. I'm from Baltimore. I know more than 6 totally crazy people who should not have guns. I'm sure there are more records out there. So that's one of the most important things we need to do. And then the other really important thing is prosecuting illegal possession of guns. Under the Obama administration, prosecutions are down 10% for illegal guns. So while they're banning guns and saying people can't have guns based on cosmetic appearances, not based on anything factual or policy-based, they're not prosecuting the bad guys. So when those people, those felons, those drug addicts, those mentally ill, are going to the gun store and lying on their form and saying they're none of those things and getting denied or getting a gun, ATF is supposed to go after them and investigate and then prosecute, and that's not happening. And until that happens, there's no deterrent, because if you're a bad guy and you think you can get away with it, why not first start at the corner store, at the corner range? And I think another big challenge we have is the treatment of mental illness in this country, making sure more people are put inpatient. So there are solutions. There are things that we can all get united on. Unfortunately, this White House and a certain part of the Senate is not looking for those. And they have an amazing amount of money with Mike Bloomberg behind them, with just bottomless pockets trying to fund this agenda. And so I wrote this book because there's a lot of misconceptions out there about gun control and gun violence, and I hope people can read it and sort of see what the facts are. So when you talk to your friends and you talk to your colleagues and they are saying, I favor gun control for this reason, you can say, well, here are the facts. You don't need to believe me. We don't even have to have an emotional argument on this. Let's just look at the facts. And on that note, maybe I'll take some questions.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Can I ask the first question?
Sure.
One thing I learned, now tell me if I got this right. I always thought the big issue was banning automatic weapons and banning semi-automatic weapons and what we ought to do, blah, blah. Am I correct that automatic weapons have been illegal for civilians in the United States since the 1930s?
Right.
But I've heard Senator Feinstein talk about banning automatic weapons. You can't get them. These are the military you see in the movies, and they pull the trigger and they do the whole room. Civilians cannot have those kind of weapons, right?
That's absolutely right.
And semi-automatic, they talk about rapid fire. You have to pull the trigger every time. Okay, well, see, I didn't know that. And
Good, that
yes, you are going to learn so much in this book. because everybody talks about it, but very few people seem well informed.
Well, and I didn't know that 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I had no idea.
Right.
I mean, I go through in my book, you read my story about how when I learned to shoot a gun for the first time, and when I went, my editor Richard taught me, he had guns in his home, and to even teach me the basic fundamentals. And I mean, I like looked down, he had an AR-15 on the ground, and I was like, I'm not touching it. I don't want to touch it. And I still had that sort of perception of like the gun could sort of jump out and attack. And I do think because as women, we aren't, unless you're from the South, because you all grew up and your fathers and grandfathers were teaching you to shoot like at a young age. I'm from Baltimore. My father did have a gun, but he hid it from us, and it was like a big secret. Mostly you're not familiar with them, we're not familiar with them, and so there's a learning curve here, but we have to be educated. There's no reason that we should not be advocates for the Second Amendment as much as men, because we need to defend ourselves, and in fact more so almost because of the physical difference between men and women, whereas these thugs that I had to face down, what could I have done? I'm 5'2". I mean, I would have been helpless. And so it is an equalizer, and it also is it's a deterrent. So when they come in the house and they see you holding a scary gun, I mean, God willing, they get scared enough to go away, But on that note, that the president he deliberately misleads the public with language.
Or he's uninformed.
I don't believe he's uninformed. There is that possibility that he's actually very stupid. But the man graduated from Harvard Law School, so I kind of don't think he's that stupid. Because he has repeatedly this year said we have to get fully automatic weapons off our streets. And he uses those phrases, fully automatic. And exactly how you described a fully automatic, you pull the trigger and, bullets fly. The military has them in Afghanistan. The police have them. You don't even use them to kill people in the military. They're for suppressive fire, meaning you hold it so the bad guys are all ducking so your guy can run. They were highly regulated in 1934 from civilian. In order to have one, you have to go through the ATF. They do a very big background check. You pay $200. They're never used in crimes. And they've been banned from import and manufacture since 1986, so they're like extremely expensive because they're so rare. I mean, they average at least like $20,000. So but it's a deliberate reason that the president does this. In fact, one thing I wrote in my book, in one speech he made in San Francisco, he said, we can't ever let those children, what happened to those children when they were all shot by a semi-automatic, a fully automatic gun. He actually corrected himself in the reverse to lie. And they weren't, first of all, I find it so shameful that he's using those children at all. And it was not 48 hours that he started pushing his gun control agenda after they died. And I think all of us, I don't know, any human being who saw the pictures and knows the families and these children is not just so upset by it. Still, it's horrific. Any children being shot, it's just horrific. It's a horrific event. And shameful that Mike Bloomberg, while the bodies were still in the school, was out there in public calling for gun control. And they deliberately mislead, and like Senator Dianne Feinstein deliberately uses the term automatic, and this goes back 20 years. They said, we're going to start using the term assault weapons, and I have this memo in my book, The Anti-Gun People. We'll use the term assault weapons because people will mistake them for fully automatic, because they do look alike. If you look at an AR-15, which is those black guns you see and with the handle, they look like the guns you see in war. And that's why about half of the owners are former military and former law enforcement, just because they're used to them. That's just what they use. But they're semi-automatic, meaning they shoot exactly the same as the photo of my gun or any other gun. They just one round. But they look scary, and so that's why they've made some inroads with that. And it's also important to remember that of all the gun deaths in the country last year, there's about 11,000 murders. About 300 were from rifles of any sort. It's in hunting rifles, whether they were AR-15s or whatever. Dianne Feinstein puts the number of assault weapon deaths at 35 a year, which, these are first of all, she's exaggerating because she wants her bill to pass, so who knows what it is. And the law enforcement doesn't track the style of rifle; it just says rifle. But it's hardly an epidemic. And yet, I have friends who are moms who know I cover this issue and say to me, I'm so worried for my kids. I don't know, we shouldn't have these assault weapons on our streets. And I had this conversation with a girlfriend, and I said, Well, let me just, explain to you a few things. First of all, it's 300 people killed by rifles every year in America, so your child's not going to get killed by a rifle. I can assure you, you are safe. I said, but think about it just sort of logically if you're not a gun person. If you're walking down the street with your child or yourself and you see a man who looks dangerous and he's carrying a big black rifle and holding it outward, what are you going to do? And she was like, not sure what I meant. I go, you're going to duck or run, because it's really obvious. That's why rifles aren't on the streets. Handguns are on the streets because they're in their pockets and you don't see it and he pulls it on you when you're walking behind you and mugs you. So that's why they're not a threat. And law enforcement overwhelmingly disagrees with all of these gun control measures. In fact, it's up to 92 to 96% of all police and law enforcement who've been polled oppose assault weapons ban, oppose high-capacity magazines, because they know these things don't reduce crime, but also they don't want to waste their time on making sure Emily Miller's 13-round magazine got switched out for a 10-round magazine before it was shipped to D.C.
Right. I know that some of you must have questions. Do we have a mic here today? Oh, yes. Here's a microphone. And if you'll raise your hand and give your name and affiliation, and Emily, I'll let you call on people.
Oh, okay. Sure, right there.
Oh, it's my turn. My name is Donna, and I'm from Arlington. I'm not affiliated with anybody. I just want to thank you for making your book available on Audible. I was able to get it as a result of your talk on WMAL.
Oh, thank you.
And you also mentioned that Terry McAuliffe is having Michael Bloomberg support him.
Yeah.
So Virginia gun laws are going to be in danger should he win the election. But the good news is that 2 senators from the state of Colorado, the liberal state of Colorado, were recalled.
That's right. And I absolutely agree. And I'm hearing a lot of people in Virginia getting really nervous. If Terry McAuliffe, who's leading in the polls right now for governor, met last week with Mike Bloomberg. Mike Bloomberg's about to be done with office. His term is up. His 3rd term. He extended himself. And he's spending so much money around the country, and I think he's going to put all his weight behind gun control. And the fact that he's giving money and supporting Terry McAuliffe, I think you're going to see, if he gets reelected, if Terry McAuliffe gets elected governor, you're going to see a very pro-gun state Virginia be under attack. And people really need to get out to vote for that reason if they care about the Second Amendment. And Colorado is a great an inspiring moment for democracy. Colorado this year, Colorado, a western, rural, agricultural hunting state, their governor Hickenlooper was actually, after the horrible Aurora movie shooting, he came out and said no gun law would have stopped this guy. This guy was completely insane. He was determined to kill. He is insane. He's alive. He was determined to kill. Nothing would have stopped him. So he wasn't blaming the guns. He was blaming the individual, which is appropriate in that situation. But as a leading Democrat in the party, he came under enormous pressure from the White House. Obama went to Colorado several times this year to push this. And so they pushed through 2 bills, one limiting magazine size to 15, and one insisting that all private exchanges of guns go through dealers, go through background checks. It went into effect on July 1st, and people in Colorado are furious because Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter, this issue goes both sides. They're like, I live on a ranch. I'm a farmer. I'm a hunter. Why are we limiting this? Why are we doing this? My representatives in the state Senate are not listening to me. So absolutely organically, they decided to try to recall 4 people, and it's very hard to get a recall in Colorado. Every state has their own laws, but theirs is about 10,000 signatures in just these small areas of the state, not that populated. They got well over for 2 of them, and Senator Harron and then Senator Morse. Senator Morse is the Democratic leader. He's the Harry Reid of Colorado, and in a great upset, both Democrats, both in Democratic districts, they recalled these guys on Tuesday. And, when I was writing this story, I talked to the NRA, I talked to the chairman of the Republican Party in Colorado, and everyone denied credit. I've never had a story where nobody wants credit for it. They were like, because they're just being honest. They said, this is from the people. They did this. This has not been organized by some higher group. And what is even most remarkable about it is Bloomberg and his allies and the labor unions poured over $2.5 million into these 2 small state recall races, well outspending the NRA or the Republican Party. And yet, they still recalled them. Unfortunately, though, the bad news of that is these laws are still in place. It doesn't change the laws. Those are going to have to go through the courts, and there's already a lawsuit in federal court over those laws being unconstitutional. almost all the sheriffs in Colorado support it. So it is a great example of how Bloomberg can't buy votes around the country, and it's the first time he's been lost that. Unfortunately, it's a little too late for this people, and so that's why I hope that people, one of the things I like to hope in my book is they read, if you're seeing the gun control spread in another state, and they are being proposed in a lot of states and on the federal level, stop it before it happens, because it's a lot harder to get a law taken back or recalled, overturned in the courts than it is to not get it passed in the first place.
Hi, I'm Emily Riley. I work here at Heritage. The same thing that happened to you with walking your dog, coming in and finding someone in the house, happened to my mother last week. And luckily, she was armed and scared him off. But my question is, what if someone comes in your house and you're armed and you kill them? What are the laws involved? Are you going to get charged with manslaughter?
No, I'm so thank God about your mom. Where did that happen? What state? Okay, great. Well, thank God that she's okay. This is an issue that is coming up more and more over the stand your ground, which you heard about a lot recently, which had nothing legally to do with the George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin case, but was brought out because the president said, now we're going to look at stand your ground laws. And stand your ground laws came from what's called the castle doctrine. The castle doctrine means your home is your castle kind of thing, and it came from ancient England, when the idea was that you have the right to be as safe in your house as the king does in his. So it is, if somebody comes into your house with the intent to harm you, do great physical harm or kill you, you have the right to shoot. And most states have this just as common law, or law, but a lot of activist judges and juries were doing differently, and so many states in the past few years have passed this castle doctrine law to make sure that it's clear that the person who is in defense, because some states start having these odd ways where they would say, for example, in the case with your mother, that if she could have run out the back door, she would have been obligated to run out the back door in her own home. And most people don't know that and think, of course, I'm in my house and someone comes in and I'm supposed to be running out the back door. And the way that sense of that law was is if you could conceivably get away safely. And most people, when they realize that that was on the books in the past about 7 years this has come about, have said, that's crazy. I'm not going to take my chance and turn my back on an armed intruder and try to run and get away. I have a gun. I'm going to, and castle doctrine is in your own home. Stand your ground is outside the home. So it's the same concept that if you're, say, on your front yard and the guy's running up to you with a gun, there are people who have had people run up to them to shoot them, have shot back, and have gone to jail and are in jail now. I know of cases because in theory, they say, you could have kind of run away on your own property, in your own yard. And so that's what stand your ground is that if somebody is about to kill you, and you cannot get away safely, you have the right to shoot and defend yourself. It seems common sense, and it's what we would all do instinctually, but some people have been put in jail, and so a lot of states have moved to put that into law. But you're fine in North Carolina. Yeah? Oh. Either one.
Perfect. My name's Alyssa. I work at Heritage as well. I'm actually from Aurora, Colorado, and so I was there when the movie shootings happened, saw a lot of that happen. I also worked in the Colorado legislature at the time when the strict gun laws actually were going through. So, of course, I appreciate you kind of talking a little bit more. I wanted to talk about the recall election a little bit more. How do you see moving forward is this going to be an example for other states with strict gun laws? Are the people going to kind of rise up and stand for having guns and being able to really, of course, defend themselves?
Definitely what happened in Colorado inspired a lot of gun groups around the country. And, talking about this, but just in basic political terms, it's a lot of money to spend. We had millions of dollars poured into these races when you've got a midterm election coming up. And there's while Mike Bloomberg can afford it and has no problem affording it, when you've got these other groups and the Republican Party, and it's expensive to do. Like John Morse, who was recalled, the Senate Democratic leader, is term limited. So all this money was spent on a non-election and nothing changes. The laws don't change. I think what hopefully the wake-up call is that they need to lobby harder to the legislatures before these laws get passed. before it goes any further. And right now, on the Senate level, there's so many people getting hit by attack ads around this country because Bloomberg is still trying to turn the votes so they can get 60 votes in the Senate. And support that's where people can do is support their senators who have stood up and said, I support the Second Amendment, I'm not going to go along with this, so that they don't change votes and they can't pass it. But it's really, politically speaking, it's, as much as this was, I think, a great uplifting movement for everyone, and really push Bloomberg back, and is great for democracy, politically speaking, it didn't make a huge lot of difference.
My name is Alethea. I'm an intern here at Heritage. And I'm originally from Nebraska, so I grew up around guns. My friends' moms carry guns in their purse. I'm used to all my friends packing in church and stuff like that. I'm very comfortable around guns. And the idea that law-abiding citizens carrying guns reduces crime is just common sense to me. You don't even have to explain to me why. But like you were talking at the beginning, where you said 88% of Americans think that gun crime is either on the rise or has remained the same. How are we even supposed to be able to get that message out to them that that's not necessarily the case, if it seems like it should be something that's really a no-brainer?
It's, I sometimes I think if I could sit down with 300 million Americans separately, I could really change minds. And so that's what, at least with a book, I hope that people read it. And really what I hope to do is they read it, but then use that information, the facts I'm giving them, to talk to friends and colleagues. And that's what I think is happening with my book, is people are using the facts in it to talk to people who are saying, we need an assault weapons ban, or gun crime is up, or things are getting worse. I was on Piers Morgan on Monday on CNN. He's rabidly anti-gun. And he just said it as fact. He said, when there's more guns, there's higher crime all the time. And I was like, no, there's not. Stop. And I stopped him. I said, no, there's not. Gun crime is down. It's been down. It's down 40% since 1991. It is not down. And I was like, and I might add, Piers Morgan, in Britain, when you had a ban in 1997, gun crime went up, went down, it went up, it went down, and then it finally started repealing. Here in the United States, as gun ownership has gone up since 1991, crime has consistently gone down. We've had no upticks. And then he had some sort of, but then 5 years after that, we had stricter laws, and then we did it, and I thought he lost the argument when he had to explain different variations. But for me, I think, it's almost evangelizing about this issue, because there is so much misinformation about there. And the more people talk, and I'm so glad to hear all of you so interested in this and learning the facts, because, and especially with women, I think because we're just more safety-oriented for ourselves personally, because we're physically smaller, and also for moms and their children. So you just want to protect them, and having the information, like you grew up in a place where moms know, I can protect my kids because I've got a gun in my bag, but a lot of people in the country don't. And so getting this information and talking to people. So when someone disagrees with you, teach them. Thank you.
You want to do a couple more?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm Paige, an intern here. And just to clarify, were you looking for an owner's permit or a concealed carry?
Very good question. That only comes up, it doesn't come up in America, but in Washington, D.C., which I have to clarify are two different places. Because in America, you have this Constitution that says you have the right to keep and bear arms. Keep meaning own in your home, bear mean carry. But in the District of Columbia, for 30 years, they ignored the keep part and the bear part. And the Supreme Court ruled on the keep part and said, yes, no, people can own guns in D.C., but they did not rule on the bear part. And they're going to at some point on either the D.C. case or other cases. But as of now, Illinois was the last state that did not allow people to carry guns outside the home, and there's a federal court overturned that law, and they had to change it just in June. So now you can carry a gun outside the home in Illinois, which leaves the District of Columbia, the nation's capital, the only place in the country where you cannot take a gun out of your home. So the 4 months and 17 steps that I went through, my gun is in my apartment, and it doesn't travel. It's not going very far. It can go to the range and home, and that's it. So I'm just as much at risk when I'm walking down the street, and I park far away or could get mugged. That hasn't changed my safety at all. And it's something I absolutely believe is going to have to get to Supreme Court to overturn. The politicians in D.C., their excuse for not abiding by the Constitution generally, because I ask about them all the time, is that there are so many important people here in D.C. who need to be protected. And I point out that all the politicians, the Supreme Court, the president, I say, well, first of all, they have guns surrounding them. I mean, you can't even get near the White House or the Congress without cops or the Secret Service, so they don't need protection. Number two, the president goes to every state in this country that has free carry laws, and no one's worried about him getting shot. I say, number three, why are their lives more important than my life? And as I said, crime is up. Violent crime is up in the city. I know you guys live, or if many of you may live around here since you work around here. I mean, Capitol Hill, everyone's getting held up for iPhones with guns. I have people tell me all the time of these cases. Why are they using a gun to get an iPhone, instead of grabbing it? Because they know you don't have a gun, and as you were saying, it's such a natural deterrent. If the bad guys thought the girl walking down the street with the iPhone, she might shoot back if I try to get her iPhone away from her with this gun, they're probably not going to do it. But they know that none of us are armed, so it's just an easy for them. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Frida Hugley. I'm just a member of the Republican Women's Clubs. I think gun control is an emotional issue, and the person who's not informed gets scared, and they want to scare you. Mm-hmm. I live in Virginia, but I'm not from Virginia. I'm from New York. And I know my husband wanted to bring his carbine down to Virginia, but I said no. But I remember my nephew, who was a probation officer in New York about 7 or 8 years ago, just went into Walmart down in Virginia, and he bought a gun, no questions asked. So, and I also heard today that in Maryland, they're having a rush of people who are trying to get guns before something goes into effect. So I think the more they try to keep people from getting guns, they're going to want them.
Well, it's so true. And one of the chapters in my book is Barack Obama is the most successful gun salesman in history. Gun sales have gone through the roof since he's been president because his gun-grabbing habits and values and goals we've known since 1996, since he first ran for office and said, I want to ban all handguns. So there's a long history there. And human nature is if you're told you can't get something, that's what you want, and that's why demand gets high. And so by saying we were going to ban these guns, people are going out and buying them. And same thing is going on with the ammunition in this country. There's such a low level of ammunition because everyone's buying it up because it's hard to get. I mean, I live in a city in D.C. where there's the, quote, assault weapons ban, so I can't get an AR-15. What do I want so much? I want an AR-15 because I can't have it. I don't know where I'd keep it in my apartment if I had it. Like, it's so big. I mean, I'd have to tell the bad guy to, back off so I could shoot him. It really wouldn't have much use for me. But because you can't have something, you want it. And, it's so basic, the Second Amendment, and yet we're seeing these rights being taken away. And like you said, in Maryland, they're one of the states this year that's passed radical gun control, even though they passed an assault weapons ban in Maryland. And even though one person was killed by a rifle last year, probably a hunting rifle because there's a lot of hunters in Maryland, one. But yet they're abridging the rights of all these other people. It's really quite remarkable. And so that's why, because soon on October 1st in Maryland, you will have to take a 5-hour safety class like I had to do in D.C., get fingerprinted, get permits in order to buy a gun. That's why there's a rush, because they all want to get them now, and they're so backlogged they can't even keep up with it. And I just wanted to answer on what I did was I got my gun registered. So that's what Maryland's pretty much going to do, is that it's a registration. So the D.C. cops know where supposedly all the law-abiding people have their guns. Which is, sort of fearful because the whole point of the Second Amendment was to avoid government tyranny. So we are armed, and they're not supposed to know who's armed. But I will say, actually, that most people I know in D.C., and I hope they never draw me into court and ask for names, who are law-abiding people, don't have their guns registered for the exact reason that they don't want the government knowing about them and then coming up with a new law and come and taking them. But you can't get a carry permit in D.C.
Maybe one more? Did you have Bridget too?
Yeah, I had one, but there was one right in the very back. Hi, my name is Kimberly, and I am too from Colorado. And when I lived in Colorado, of course, it was very conservative, so things have changed. But I'm very happy that those conservative values came back at gun control. Over the gun control debate, I was very voiceful about with Senator Ted Cruz and Senator Mike Lee. And you said something that maybe I need understanding with. ATF, or ATC, is it? That are supposed
ATF?
to, is it
Yeah.
ATF? Are supposed to go after the people that are not having guns illegally or legally.
Right.
Why aren't they doing it? Is there a specific reason? I mean, in one moment, the administration is saying we need gun control, but in the next,
Well, the issue, it's very interesting, and I didn't even quite understand it myself until I started writing about it, about how the background check system works in order to stop illegal guns. What it is, again, it's called NICS, and it's an FBI database with all the, supposedly, they're not all in there, the records of all these people who aren't supposed to have guns. And then you go into the store, and they either make a call or do it on the computer to find out if you're one of those people. And then what happens is there's called NICS denials. So they'll say, Emily Miller, you're not approved, you have to come back in 3 days. And sometimes they do that deliberately, so you're the idiot felon who comes back in 3 days and they arrest you. Sometimes it's my name, Emily Miller, there's a millions of me and they got it messed up and it's someone who's denied for the wrong reasons. All those denials go to ATF, from FBI to ATF. They sort through them, figure out who's been in there for the right reasons and who needs to be, and then it goes to the ATF field offices. And then they're supposed to investigate. And as that, we start with the millions, it goes like this, it goes like this, it goes like this, and there were 60 prosecutions last year. 60 in the whole country. So, and what is so unbelievable, and again, it goes back to the president and the vice president willfully. Are they stupid or are they willful? Like, I just don't understand. In my book, I interviewed Jim Baker, who's a federal lobbyist for the NRA, and he was the one that the White House, when they were writing their gun agenda in January, Vice President Biden led that. They invited the NRA to one meeting. And so Jim Baker went, and he's known Vice President Biden for a long time. And he said to Biden, he said, with all due respect, Mr. Vice President, you're not prosecuting the criminals on the NICS checks. Because what it is the crime that they commit when you investigate, you're not investigating because they never got the gun. Or sometimes they did get the gun, and that's right. But the crime that they've committed is really simple. It's perjury. Because you fill out a form, and you said, I'm not a felon, I'm not a drug addict, I'm not a legal alien. It's perjury is the charge that we get them. And it's a good thing, because you get them on a low charge, you get them off the streets. And so that's what they have. And so Baker said to Biden, with all due respect, you've got to go after these NICS checks. You've got to go after these. And Biden said, we don't have time to go after paperwork violations. And as Mr. Baker explained to me in the book, that is the violation. They haven't done anything else. That's how you get the bad guys off the street. And it's just this complete non-understanding of how you catch them. And it's been very successful. Richmond had this example of doing this and getting them on this low-level crimes. And murder rate, it's called Project Exile, murder rate went down 50% in 7 months. So you get them on these low-level crimes, and you get the bad guys off the streets. But unfortunately, the vice president either doesn't understand it, they don't care. We'll all have to judge for ourselves what their motivations are.
Hey, I just was wondering, you mentioned the sexual assault number rise in the district. I actually hadn't heard that. It's kind of frightening, so be careful, all these new interns. Are there any statistics out there, have you done any research that looks at what happens when a state has a concealed carry law go into effect? What happens to the number of sexual assault crimes when those laws then go on the books?
There hasn't been it hasn't been completely proven that concealed carry decreases crime. It hasn't been definitively. Those concealed carry laws are fairly recent. I mean, it's within almost the past 10 years, we've gotten about half of the states have developed these concealed carry laws, and now every state has them. And we have now 8 million concealed carry holders in the United States, which is a remarkable number from where we were 25 years ago. It's going to take a while for the data to catch up. I know some of the professors are working on looking at these individual states and the numbers. I've heard, and it's too preliminary, that just having 2 to 3% of the population have a concealed carry is enough of a deterrent. And that is actually the deterrent number. So it doesn't mean we all have to walk around with guns. It's just a few of us throw, and it is, like you were saying earlier, it's just common sense that they're not going to attack if they are wondering if you're going to have a gun. But all that being, again, it goes, the one thing we do know for a fact is that we've gone from very few people having a concealed carry permit, and most states being what they call may issue, which means you have to prove a really good reason to have a carry permit, which could be anything from I work at a bank, or, you know, I'm a bail bondsman, or things like that, to almost the very fewer may issue states, most shall issue states, 8 million gun carry permit holders in this country now. And again, crime is down. Crime keeps going down. So what we do know is the reverse, is that more people having guns, more people carrying guns, does not lead to increased crime, which is what this administration would like you to believe.
Emily, for your final comment, would you talk about people who did grow up in Nebraska, or in the South, or in rural areas, and they're afraid of guns? That was me a few years ago. And almost all of the ladies in the Claire Booth Lewis Policy Institute went and took an NRA course. A bunch of us got the concealed carry permit. And I'm still a little bit afraid of guns, but I'm just so happy I didn't do it before somebody came into my house or the situation you were in. Could you give some words of encouragement for the ones that are a little scared yet?
Yeah.
To go ahead and do it and find out what the laws are in your state. In Virginia, you don't have to run out the back door, that's for sure. In your house, you can kill them. But you need to know. You need to know what the laws are.
Well, I'll say, you know, one of the things, and I think it's the last line of, and I know it's the last line of my book, I say, I don't call myself particularly pro-gun, I'm pro-Second Amendment, because a gun is a tool, and this is a fight for freedom. So I just want to be clear that I'm not advocating all of you go out and get guns, because it is such a big responsibility. It's something you can't take lightly. It's much bigger than a dog or a cat or a fish. I mean, I have to always be aware of where my gun is. I have to always be aware of, you know, whether it's loaded, if it's locked, who's in my house, who's in my apartment. If there's children there, I have to be trained regularly and go to the range. So if you decide to do that, you just have to understand that this is a big responsibility, and we want responsible gun ownership. However, I do believe if you live in a city and where crime is increasing, when you're in a dangerous place, and as a woman, this will make you safer if you feel comfortable with that responsibility. And you know what, I'll tell you, they are a little bit scary at first, and every time I go to the range, I am a little bit jolted each time, and quite frankly, because it's very loud inside. And even though you're wearing ear protection, eye protection, it is loud, a lot of banging around, but it is the most empowering, thrilling, your heart race out of your chest thing when you shoot a gun for the first time, or you haven't in a long time, and you want to get the bullseye, and you want to do it, and, you know, now I'm like, I want to shoot AR-15s, and I want to shoot this, and, you know, it is a thrill, it's fun, it's, you know, and so maybe the first time you go, it's a little loud, and one thing I say to women just might help is I do double ear protection. I put the plugs in, and then the muffs on top, so it just is a little bit less loud, because that's the jolting thing, it's what makes you sort of jump, but, I promise you, it is a really fun activity. I've taken my girlfriends to the range and taught them how to shoot, and it's something we go and do together now. And it's really empowering. And, you know, I'm not scared anymore. I'm not scared someone's going to come in at night and rape and kill me, because I have a loaded gun next to my bed. And I know that I can defend myself. So if that's something you choose to do, I highly encourage it, and I hope that you do.
That's great.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have a couple gifts for you. What a wonderful talk. What a wonderful book. And we're going to sell this for $20 outside, and you'll sign a couple for us?
I'd love to. Yes, of course.
Wonderful. And we have a couple of gifts for you here. We have our limited edition Claire Booth Lewis Policy Institute coffee mug with her famous saying,
"No good deeds go unpunished." Right. That's so true.
And we have a tote bag, so you can put all your gifts in a Claire Booth Lewis tote bag.
Thank you.
And a conservative classic that all you interns should write the name down, of Frank Myers, In Defense of Freedom. So thank you so much for all you're doing to defend freedom as well.
I'm so honored to be here today.
Thank you.
Really.
And we invite you all to join us across the lobby for lunch, where we'll continue the conversation. And she'll do the book signing. Buy your books out here, and we can set up for the signing right here on the stage.